Recently, political debate has become a trend on YouTube, and while it can be entertaining to some extent, I think almost all of it is completely useless, and it's a waste of time if the goal is to actually settle political issues in a civil manner. Jubilee's Surrounded series is the most prominent of them, and the format promotes fast-paced, angry, emotional political discussion.
Okay.
But you're
a little different.
But you're a
than yours.
descendant of immigrants, settlers,
I didn't know.
colonialists.
Yeah,
You
colonials.
don't look very Native American to me.
I am Native American. Whites are Native Americans. What are you
Sorry,
talking about?
You're not.
And there's a reason why I do not react to almost any of their videos on here. Whenever someone actually brings up an intelligent point and a real, thoughtful conversation happens, the contestants in the surrounding chairs just tend to get bored.
Hold on a second.
What does subjective morality mean? What does it mean?
Subjective morality
Define
means
it.
that it comes in everybody's own opinion, their own form,
True
not
dependent upon a
objective.
stance.
Again,
God is a stance, and that's the truth
hold on
of
a second.
morality.
So if let's
And they raise their flags and vote the current debater out. To me, this series reveals a greater truth about debate in general. That if everyone comes in to the debate with no intention of ever having their minds changed, absolutely no serious discussion can be had. In today's installment of Twig's Change Project, I am going to yap about a time when I actually had a genuine exchange with someone who would identify as a conservative, and contrast that with the clickbaity, ragebaity style of Jubilee's Surrounded, in order to illustrate why understanding and genuine, honest exchange of thoughts and ideas is what really encompasses debate. Not fast-paced, rapid-fire emotional statements with no evidence. Before we begin though, I would like to clarify that this video is almost entirely my opinion, besides when I share some actual statistics and laws near the end, because I do not want to be mistaken for someone who actually studies political science for a living or knows a whole lot about economics, because while I do have some background and some knowledge about those things, I am in no position to say that I am an expert on this topic. Without further ado though, let's begin. So in order to understand the story that I'm about to tell, you guys need a little bit of background information. This person that I talked to was part of one of the Christian groups I was in college while I was still Christian. If you guys haven't seen this video up here about why I left Christianity, go check it out. I really think it's one of my best work in terms of raw emotional authenticity, and I think some of the editing's pretty good too. And I ended up telling this person that I had left the faith because obviously she does not watch my videos because she is not my target audience. And once she learned that I had become agnostic, she wanted to know why. So she invited me to talk with her for, actually it ended up being a really long time. But she invited me to just have a one-on-one heartfelt discussion about why I left the faith, and she wanted to know if she could help me with anything because of it. And as part of it, she explicitly said that she wanted to understand me better. And obviously, this person is my friend, so that's why she has a personal interest in that. So I told her a lot about my background. Some of the things I shared were how I attended the Encampment for Citizenship in 2 years, really cool summer program. Got to talk with a lot of activists, got to paddle in a boat called a tomol that is like an ancient traditional thing from the Chumash tribe. We got to talk to a lot of the members of that tribe as well. We made some banger art. Like I made a rap about systems of oppression in general, specifically just one verse, but it was pretty cool. We made songs about, rising up, fighting capitalism, achieving social equality, stuff like that. I talked about how I had family who personally identified as LGBTQ+, and how that shaped my worldview about the LGBTQ+ community. I told her about my high school and a lot of the things I learned about economics, about history, not just from like a white American perspective. I talked about the Native American Studies classes that I took and how all of those things shaped my worldview. And she was in awe of a lot of those things. She thought that the way that I was brought up, and my teenage years especially, she thought that I had experienced some really cool things. However, even though it may seem like it, I didn't want to talk for the entire time. And I was curious to know how her upbringing and experiences shaped her worldview as well. So I asked her about her beliefs. I started with stuff like the military and whether she thought that a big military was a good thing or not, and she was actually against the military in general being like really, really big because of like Christian values against like harming people and stuff, which I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I obviously had to ask her about like the social justice side of politics, which is like the LGBTQ+ community, abortion, stuff like that. And she is against abortion, and she does not support the LGBTQ+ community. But in talking with her then, I realized that a lot of what she was saying was like rooted in compassion, but it was twisted by the way that external forces have shaped conservative Christian politics today. And I'll get to talking a little bit about that later in the video. But perhaps the most striking thing that I took away from that conversation was just how little she knew about economics. Like, she probably had to take an economics course in high school, but she did not really understand a lot about like specific economic policy, such as like what raising the interest rates does, for example, and she doesn't really understand or have a strong opinion about what kind of economic system works best for her. She really only had strong opinions about the social issues. Anyways, despite the fact that we obviously had vastly different beliefs and we saw the world differently, I was patient and understanding with her, as you would be towards a friend, or really as you should be towards basically anyone. And she wasn't like judgmental towards me for disagreeing with her, even about like Christianity, which is essentially the foundation for her worldview entirely. And near the end of our discussion, she showed compassion by praying for me. And by wishing that like God will find his way back into my heart or something like that. Obviously, I have no idea if that will actually happen, but for what it's worth, I can tell you that even conservatives don't necessarily have like a foundation of being bad people. I don't think that any human is like inherently evil necessarily. This person that I was talking to was like another intelligent college student who just had different life experiences. And I'm not saying that I agree with any of her views, obviously. But what I am saying is that I have way more in common with a conservative Christian, like regular person like her, than I would with like Donald Trump or with Charlie Kirk. And no, the distinction is not that they're MAGA Republicans. The distinction is that they're extremely wealthy and they use religion to make people vote against their own economic interests. The thing with a lot of MAGA Republicans is that they just were not educated in a lot of the ways that I was. They don't necessarily know about the benefits of universal health care. They don't necessarily understand fiscal policy or supply side economics the same way that I might, because to them, they're too distracted with hating trans people or wanting to deport immigrants. Even with that, even though we obviously disagree, I believe that they have just been misled by the puppets of the elite, aka Republican presidents and congresspeople. There was an important historical turning point in around the 80s where you suddenly started to see a lot more anti-abortion rhetoric from evangelical Christians after they'd had no enemy to turn to once the civil rights movement accomplished what it needed to. Obviously, what I am trying to say is that a lot of conservative Christians, before like gay marriage and abortion were big issues, were racist. And the racist people, unfortunately, still had a lot of hate inside of them, and they had to find a new thing to direct the hate at. So what they had to do was convince white working class Christians to vote against their own economic interests. And before you say, Twig, you keep complaining that these Republicans are voting against their own economic interests. Don't you have any facts to back that up? Actually, I do. And this is like the one part of the video that isn't an opinion piece. Here I have some actual policies that I found. Specifically, Ronald Reagan's Economic Recovery Act of 1981, which was based on the economic philosophy of trickle-down economics. Essentially what this one did was it cut taxes for big corporations, allowing for CEOs to profit way more and pay their workers less. That means that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Another example I found was that of George W. Bush's Economic Growth and Tax Relief Reconciliation Act of 2001. Sorry, that's a mouthful. But essentially what that act did was it provided huge tax cuts for the rich. Again, making it so that lower income people had to pay proportionally more in taxes and thus economically benefit less from the growing economy. And then obviously you have the recent examples of Trump's Big Beautiful Bill, which again provides a lot of corporate deregulation and tax exemptions, as well as just like tax cuts for the rich in general, which looks eerily similar to a lot of Trump's tax cuts that he did in 2017, which accomplished similar things to the Big Beautiful Bill, but obviously they're much worse now. And despite all of that, these conservative Christians, these white working class conservative Christians, voted against their economic interest because they were fed a lie about the LGBTQ plus community and against abortion, and also against immigrants coming over at the southern border. There's still an element of racism. Don't forget about that. Christians complain about white South Africans being allowed into the country as refugees, but you do hear about them calling Latinx people from the southern border criminals. And that rhetoric mimics a lot of the rhetoric that you saw in the time of Jim Crow and of the time before that where slaves were recently freed. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the average conservative, even the average MAGA Republican, is not your enemy. Whether you identify as conservative, as like centrist liberal, as leftist, whatever, your real enemy, the people that are keeping money out of your pocket, are the ultra-rich. The only minority group that has ever negatively impacted your life are the top 1% of income earners in the US. It's that simple. They are literally inventing loopholes on the federal level to avoid having to pay the same proportion of their money in taxes that us lower income citizens have to do. And thus, they get richer, our economy suffers, and we climb further and further into debt because of them. Not because of that trans person over there who's just using the bathroom of their preferred gender. Not because of that immigrant who's working as a janitor in your school. No, it's the ultra-rich inventing ways to steal your money legally. I guess what I'm trying to say is that people on the left in America, including myself, we have to stop villainizing MAGA as a whole. Sure, you can villainize Trump, you can villainize Elon Musk all you want, but you do not want to villainize the ordinary citizens who voted for Trump. Because it is not them who are making your lives worse. It's that big, fat, ugly orange man up there. So that's all I got for you today. I hope you found this video insightful. I hope you found my yapping at least like somewhat entertaining. And if you enjoyed this style of like free-flowing, just me talking at a camera, please consider subscribing, because it tells me that I should make more free-flowing videos like this. As always, I hope you guys have a great day,